Like I see a binge as it's lights on the dashboard. It
Mm-hmm.
tells us there's something going on under the hood. So if we can then look under the hood, see what's going on, we take care of what's going on. The binges take care of themselves. Like we don't have to
Yeah.
do all this rigmarole to never binge again or like eliminate all these foods from our life or never leave the house or never go to parties or do all of these things. Like that's not the answer. The answer's under the hood. It's not in the food itself.
What's up, you beautiful beasts? I'm Katie. I'm on a mission to help humans become the best possible versions of themselves and to strive for overall health, mental health, emotional health, physical health, all of the healths, without ever having to step on a scale. I have had the privilege to talk to all kinds of different humans who've been through a plethora of experiences just being a human and existing. I believe that every single time somebody shares their story, at least one person listening will learn from it, be inspired by it, and maybe, just maybe, even change the entire direction of their life. These are the stories of humans unveiling their beautiful beast. Keep listening. This is the Unveiling the Beast podcast. So yeah, I was doing some pre-stalking and I see that you're an athlete and I scrolled really far down and saw the word accident.
Oh,
So
yes.
yeah, I'm sure that's part of your story, but can you tell our listeners like who you are and why you are who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Jane Pilger, and I am a binge eating and body trust coach. And basically, I am so passionate about helping women who feel out of control around food to develop just trust and peace with food, peace with your body, really just creating connection. What I find most often is when people really struggle with food, it's because of a disconnection of some sort. And so we end up using food to we're either trying to disconnect or we already
Mhm.
are feeling disconnected. We may be trying to use it to connect in some way, but I find this connection, there really is a disconnection there. And so we can come back and create connection, and we can create connection through safety, accessing safety, developing safety. So many of us don't have that safety with
Yeah.
ourselves, with our bodies, with food, like those areas. Like if we can do that, when we do that, we all can, we all have the ability to, but it's like for me, that piece of really the safety, the trust, the connection was so different than anything that I learned from all the books that I read, all the other podcasts that I listened to, the eating disorder treatment that I went through 2 rounds of, like all the things. To me, it's like what was missing was really understanding safety and trust. It's like those are the two things. And literally it all comes down to connection. So that's what I do. And yeah, I have a podcast called Binge Breakthrough, and that's a great place where I just really talk about all the things that I just wish I knew earlier in my journey and my struggles with binge eating. And so I just figure, I mean, if I can help one person out there not have to either not have to go through what I went through or not have to believe the lie that they're broken. And I think that's what so many people who struggle with food feel like. And I know I've heard you talk about this too, right? It's like you just feel like you're broken. There's something wrong with me. I must be defective. I must be broken. But the problem is nobody else is talking about it. And so we just feel broken when the reality is there are so many people struggling in the exact same way, but there's just so much shame and judgment around it that we don't want to talk to anybody about it because we're just certain that nobody else could be doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love when I meet people that I feel like they're telling my story. Know what I
Yes.
mean? So like
Yes.
I know my answer to this question, but what would you say contributes to the disconnection and lack of trust?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think it's for sure, I would say it's the messages we receive. And so for some people, for all of us, I mean, I guess we might have listeners from all over the world. So I don't know what it's like to grow up in a country other than the United States. But for anyone growing up in the United States who has access to magazines, television, movies, right? Like we receive from everywhere the message that your body needs to be a very, certain size, a certain look, a certain shape in order to be loved, accepted, admired, approved. So we get
Yeah.
that big, broad message that's basically in our water. And then many of us, most of us also received additional messages from whether they were primary caregivers, whether they were people at school, maybe it was teachers, maybe it was other students. The messages then the kind of more individual pointed at you very specifically messages. It's like
Hmm.
those are the things I remember. This was in one of my probably my first round of eating disorder. I went through 2 rounds of intensive outpatient treatment at a local eating disorders treatment center. And I remember that one of the first times we were sitting around in a group and we were all basically sharing the story of what's your first memory of somebody saying something about your body? And I was fascinated to hear so many stories. And now working with so many women, it's the same. So many stories of whether it's a family member, either, you shouldn't eat that. Like I remember so clearly this one woman, I can picture her as if she's sitting right next to me in that treatment center. She basically, her dad would tell her, if you get seconds on dessert, nobody's going to want to marry you. Like if you
Wow.
get second, you are going to get fat and then nobody will want to marry you. And so this it was like one of her like pivotal key memories. And so many of us, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, like think for yourself, when did you first get the message that you specifically, not just everybody, because we all see it, right, in the magazines and the movies and on
Yeah.
TV and what is shown to us, but like when did you very specifically get the message that your body was not okay or that it needed to change in some way? And my guess is everybody's going to have their own answer. Like, what would you say for you? Like, what's your answer to that question?
As you were saying that, I'm thinking about it in my head. And
Yeah.
for me, I don't remember like the first time somebody made fun of me for being fat because I was always the bigger girl. That's how I'm built, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't remember a specific moment, but I do remember my grandma was my biggest bully.
Mm,
And um things like she'd hand out appetizers to everybody but me during
mm,
um holiday events and say, well,
oh,
you don't need it. But the
oh,
the time I remember, um the first time I felt disgust towards my body, my
mm-hmm,
grandma wanted to send me to fat camp,
mm,
and it came with a VHS. I'm telling my age, but it came with a VHS, and I watched it over and over and over again, longing to go to this fat camp. And I remember the first time I looked down at my belly and I went, "Ugh, I'm disgusting." And
mm,
I was like
yeah,
8.
mm,
8. And that
yes,
messed me up
yes,
for
yes,
years.
yes. So,
Yeah.
so many, this is so common. So, some people have a very specific memory, like it was this moment, it was this person, it
Mhm.
was this thing. Other people have, like what you're saying, which is a general, like, these things, these examples of, my grandma, like the times with the holidays, or that, like for you, clearly one of your pivotal moments is that VHS tape, and like the message that watching that then gave you, right? That's like, oh, this body is disgusting, it needs to change. Some other people have a sense of more of just a time of life, like maybe it was an age that for me, like I know for me it was I went away to, when I was in high school, I went away to Paraguay for 8 weeks. It was like a little mini Peace Corps type of thing.
Mhm.
And I gained like 20 pounds in 8 weeks. And so I had, because I gained a good amount of weight in a short period of time, I got stretch marks. I had stretch marks on my breasts. I had stretch marks on my hips. And I played volleyball in high school, and we wore the little, like, they were called bun huggers at the time, but
Mhm.
they were essentially kind of like somebody might picture granny panties.
Mhm.
But you could see the stretch marks on my, you could see the red stretch marks on my thighs from the weight that I had gained. And that, like, for me, that's when it started. Like, that's when I was like, oh, this is bad. I need to lose weight, kind of really started the restrictive dieting and the calorie counting and the going to the gym, and that, like, that for me was when I really kind of had the message. So I didn't get, growing up, um I didn't get messages about my body. But what did also kind of set the stage for me was I didn't grow up learning how to deal with emotions or handle emotions, which I know is similar to your story too. And so many people who struggle with food, and it's, I mean, my parents weren't modeled it either. They didn't know what they didn't know. And so when I went to college, I went to college, and here I am in this new place, away from any talk about connections, right? I am by myself. I have no friends. I have no family member. No, any of my previous kind of connections are all gone. I'm experiencing a lot of emotions, and I don't know what they are. I don't know what to do with them. I also have just spent a solid year trying to lose weight and, like, counting calories and going to the gym and all of these things. So it was really kind of like this perfect storm. And so my very first binge was in college. It was freshman year. I was in my dorm. I had my own little dorm room, and I received a care package, and it was a box of little miniature candy bars, basically.
Mhm.
And I don't remember the binge itself, but what I do remember is I remember sitting on the floor with this empty box in front of me, and just candy bar wrappers, empty, strewn all around me. And I remember looking and kind of just being like, oh my gosh, what have I just done? And I felt, I was ashamed. I was mortified anybody would find out. I for sure thought I was broken. And that was like, I was like, I've got to stop this terrible thing that I've done. I have to stop. And
Mhm.
like that really, like, I say that started it, but really probably what started it was going on the diet back in high school when I had the stretch marks. But then it was just like trying to stop this terrible thing I was doing for decades. I spent.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like to compare my binges were like out of body experiences. Like
Yes.
you're not really there. And then when you're done, you're like, holy crap, what?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
You
What
know what
just
I mean?
happened? The way that I refer to it sometimes is that it's like, for me, I kind of have two analogies. For me, it's like a way to, like, turn the lights off on
Mhm.
myself. So it's like, and I think so many of us do this. This kind of comes back to that disconnection term, right? So when we have like the internal judgment, the, oh my God, I'm so disgusting. I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, all of the internal dialogue that we have, we're judging ourselves. We're saying like how bad and how gross and how awful we are. It's like this judgment. It's so, like, yucky to hear. And if you think about for yourself, it's like, what do you do when somebody else in your life is judging you? Like, what do you want to do when somebody's judging you?
Well, it depends on when in my life you're asking.
Right?
Now it's like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes. Yes.
It did take a long
Yeah.
time to get to that
Yeah.
point where like I don't, not that I don't care what people think, because if we didn't care what other people thought, we'd be like psychotic.
Right.
But
Yeah.
to the point where their opinion of me doesn't change my mind about me. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
Whereas
Yeah.
before it was, you think I'm fat? Oh my gosh, I'm so fat. What can I do now to be not fat?
Mm,
You know, that whole
right. Yeah.
mental cycle.
Yeah. What I find for so many people is it's like when we get judged, or when somebody else is judging us, often what we want to do is just get away from them. It's kind of like a
Mhm.
protective mechanism, right? It's like, ew, I don't want to be judged. Even if I agree with you, like, I don't want to be judged. So I just want to, like, get away from you. And it's like we do the same, but we can't physically get away from ourselves. but it's like we learn that we can get away from ourselves by turning the lights off. So if I binge, I'm turning the lights off on myself. It's like this is my way to get away from myself. It's like this is how I disconnect from myself. It's how I turn the lights off on myself because I don't want to hear all those terrible things I'm saying to myself. Nobody does. It feels awful.
Yeah.
So it's like the way, so then I would say it was like me turning the lights off. And then at some point, the lights have to come back on because we can't stay disconnected from our bodies the entire time. But the other analogy I use is that for me, it was like when I growing up, I in my family when we would have arguments or any sense of conflict, basically I would just we would all just leave. So I would go to my room, I would slam the door. I wish I could remember what I did when I was in there, but I can't. But I would slam the door, and then the next day I would come out and we all just acted as if nothing had happened. So it's just like swept under the rug. We don't talk about it. But like the only way that I really dealt with it was just by slamming the door. And so I realized this actually also in eating disorder treatment. We would do art therapy and we had this little room and we would sit around and we would, do various pieces of art. And the door in the art therapy room, it would slam sometimes. And
Mm,
every time that door slammed, it was really like it activated my nervous system. I mean, I would just be like, like it really, I mean, it just, oh. And then somehow I'm sure it was through, just uncovering, becoming aware of something. I made the connection between slamming the door when I was in high school and not being able to really like verbalize or talk about what was going on. And then the connection between, oh my gosh, when I binge, I'm like slamming the door on myself.
mm,
And once I made that connection, that door did not change. That door kept slamming and it did not bother me again. It was like, wow, it was fascinating to just to make that connection and to see like, oh yeah, that was like it's the only way I knew how to deal with my emotions at the time was just go slam the door. And then like and even through binging, when I was using the binge, I used it for I don't want to say used it. It served a lot of different purposes, but when one of the purposes was communicating emotions that I didn't know how to deal with otherwise, it's like, oh, that makes so much sense. And
yeah.
that's so much of what I love to do with people is like just help them see why does it make sense? How does it make sense? How does your binging make sense? Because I find that when we can make sense of the binging, then we can see it a whole other way. So the way that I like to talk about it is like most of us that like think that we're just gross and terrible and wrong and we just have to change it, have to stop binging. It's like we're looking at ourselves through, let's say, blue colored glasses. And the blue glasses are, I'm gross, I'm broken, something's wrong with me, I may never figure this out. Those are kind of the blue glasses. And what I do is I come along and I'm like, hey, let's put on these yellow glasses. And the yellow glasses are like, this all like has a purpose. There's a reason behind all of this. Like, let's really understand why it's happening. And then if we can understand why, there is a solution. It's the reason isn't because you're broken. The reason is one of these other things. And if we look then at those, then we can really get under the hood. Like I see a binge as it's lights on the dashboard. It
Hmm.
tells us there's something going on under the hood. So if we can then look under the hood, see what's going on, we take care of what's going on. The binges take care of themselves. Like we don't have to
Yeah.
do all this rigmarole to never binge again or like eliminate all these foods from our life or never leave the house or never go to parties or do all of these things. That's not the answer. The answer's under the hood. It's not in the food itself.
Yeah. Almost like the binge is the band-aid rather than, you're band-aiding the symptom rather than finding where the symptom is coming from.
Yeah, it's like that. What
Yeah.
I said. Yeah, it's like with the binge. To me, the binge is the light. It's the alert. Something's going on. And then
Yeah.
when we try to just like change the food, well, I just need to stop eating these foods. Like that's the problem. I just need to get all this stuff out of the house, or I just need to, go back to whatever diet I've tried 5 other times. That to me is like putting it's like putting duct tape over the dashboard. It's like, oh, see, I'm just gonna cover it up. We're just gonna pretend like everything's okay. But if you keep driving your car without addressing the lights, those lights come on for a reason. The car's gonna
Mm-hmm.
break down eventually, and then we're gonna have a lot more repair and maintenance to do than if we address the lights as soon as they start coming on.
I love that. I want to
Yeah.
dig into something you said, just a minor detail where you said, I can't have it in the house. I get that a lot.
Mhm.
I know me, if I have it in the house, I'll eat all of it. So
Yeah.
what would you say to somebody who says that to you? I know me. Oh no, you don't understand. It's because you restrict yourself from it. No, but I know me.
Yes. Yes. So, and that it like if you look at that, the way that I like to look at it is what I like to do with clients is like we're changing who you are being. It's like your identity as an eater.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you are in the like, well, I know me, right? I know me. I just can't, once I start, I just can't stop. Like all of that, like who you're being is somebody who's out of control with food, somebody who doesn't trust themselves. Like that is your identity. And it makes sense. You've got a lot of evidence, you've got a lot of past,
Yeah.
history, but that doesn't mean that you can't be trusted. It means there's likely a whole lot of reasons that led you to the behaviors that you think mean you are out of control and you can't be trusted. So, what I like to do is see, instead of changing, like a lot of people like to look at themselves from the what am I doing? Right? Am I bringing food in the house? Am I not bringing food in the house? Am I eating this? Am I not eating that? Like we start from like the behavior, but I think we need to start with the being. Who am I being? What is my identity? We literally create a new identity of yourself as an eater.
Mm-hmm.
And that from there, if I'm in the process of becoming somebody who's calm and peaceful and relaxed around food, the way that I show up is going to be very different than if I come in and I'm like, "Ooh, I'm out of control. I can't trust myself." I'm like always, like always tight, 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 always fear, always anxious, always counting, trying to control, like all of that. Like that's who we're being. So that's where like I like to start with the being first,
Mm-hmm.
and then what we do from there is going to be really different. And then that's how it's like it naturally kind of happens instead of just thinking, well, I just have to keep this food out of the house because you can. 100%. You absolutely can. But those foods like don't they still exist.
Yeah.
So you can either keep those foods, you can either like keep yourself away from those foods and kind of keep your life either keep your life really small, or be when you are around those foods have it be really challenging. The so many people are like, well, either whenever I go to a party, I'm just like so obsessed with the food, or I just stay right there, or I eat all the food, or I can't pay attention, or I don't eat anything there, but then I go home and I eat. Or there are some people who are like, I just don't even go. I just don't even go. I don't even go to parties because I don't want to be in that situation. So that is an option, totally. Or we could change who we're being and let those foods still be there, and take some of our own power back over the food instead of giving
Mm-hmm.
the food all of the power. And it feels like so powerful when we essentially try to eliminate it and try to take it away and try to think that we can't handle it. Like there's so many different factors in there, but I would say like a lot of it does start with like who are you being as an eater?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
I,
all. Oh, go ahead.
I was just curious for you, like what as you've shifted, and even just thinking about that, like who would you say like you were as an eater, and like who are you now?
I got a lot of rules
Yes.
over the
Yeah.
years, and I was that person that was I can't have it in the house or I'll eat it all.
Hmm.
And I think it's interesting because I hear the I know me, I'll eat it all, but you're in that mindset when you don't know yourself and you're not connected. You don't have the mind body connection.
Yes.
And so the idea of unconditional permission to eat, which
Hmm.
doesn't mean people get that mixed up. It doesn't mean eat whatever you want and how much you want, wherever, whenever. It means you have permission to eat this thing or not eat this thing that's right in front of you.
Yeah,
Um, so with that said, I can have a bag of chips in my cupboard now and it'll be there for a week, 2 weeks,
yeah.
unless my son gets to him. But
Yes.
whereas before I didn't keep chips in the house, and if I bought a bag of chips, I would eat them all because I need to get them out of the house before tomorrow when I start my diet again.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a huge, but I made that connection of the I know me, I'll eat it all, but you don't know you because your mind and your body are not connected
That's
while
exactly
you're
right.
saying that.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And then it
Mhm.
goes back to that, connection, right? It's like
Yeah,
it literally all comes back. I just believe it all comes back to connection at the end of the day.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. What
Mm-hmm.
about you? What were some of your I guess eating patterns, unless was binging the only thing, or did you have like a set of rules that you followed?
I for sure had rules. I would say like all through high school, well, it's like the end of high school and then all through college, and I would say even the first beginnings of my kind of working professional career, I was counting calories. I was reading, Clean Eating and Shape magazine, and um, like I very much had rules in terms of what was good to eat, what was bad to eat. Um, I also then started getting into triathlon. Probably it was probably a few years out of college when I started doing triathlon, and I've always really enjoyed exercise. Always, like, so I have exercised quite a bit, but I never exercised to punish myself. I never exercised to like make up for a binge. I always really enjoyed it. So I was doing triathlon, and then I'm doing quite a bit of exercise, and I'm reading these magazines that are telling you to eat like 1,500 calories a day. And I mean, already 1,500 calories a day is like not enough, like for a person, but
Yeah.
this was like I'm trying to eat 1,500 calories a day and also trying to swim and bike and run
Yeah.
and learn how to do triathlon. And I remember just, of course, I had so many problems. I remember going to Overeaters Anonymous thinking that if I just, like somebody just would just tell me what to eat, how much to eat, then I would be fine. This was, I kind of grew up in Oprah's heyday. And I remember just thinking like, well, if I had somebody to just cook all my food for me, then that would be amazing. And just all like a lot of, for sure, a lot of rules, a lot of trying to fix things, all kinds of diets. The Overeaters Anonymous thing obviously
Mm,
did not work for me. I remember going to Overeaters Anonymous, and for anybody who didn't go, like it's very rules based. There's certain things that you basically just have to abstain from, like desserts and sugar and those types of things. But they also gave you at the time back in the day. I don't know if they still do, but back in the day, they gave you basically had this card, and for each meal you were supposed to eat like however many servings of the various food groups. And so I remember kind of like doing the card, and then I'm trying to figure it out, and then I would binge, and I would like try to like calculate all the things. And you have a sponsor that you talk to, and I remember talking to my sponsor like after a binge, and I had done all these things, and they were like, you're really not supposed to, like, basically, you're not supposed to eat that much. I'm like, well, okay, thanks. Like, this is not at all helpful. So I didn't last very long in Overeaters Anonymous. But it was just like a lot of that type of thing of kind of just trying different diets, trying different ways to, because I was simultaneously trying to stop binging and also either lose weight or not gain weight. And so, I basically was just living on the pendulum of, I mean, the class, it literally was the classic binge restrict cycle. And I was very much in shame and judgment. I was very emotionally I did not have, I had a very, I have a term called emotional capacity, which is your capacity to deal with any emotion. And my emotional capacity was very, very small. So
Mm.
that like all of these different factors, plus then I'm also falling in love with triathlon and trying to do this and trying to be an athlete while also trying to like not eat very much, which it's, that's a, it's a challenging thing to do.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of things there. Interesting, funny. I don't. It's not funny. Um, Interesting story. This was years ago. I can't remember how many years ago. It was many many years ago. But I ended up in the emergency room because I had binged on. I had a. I had been. I had eaten a lot of things, but towards the end of the binge, I ate a box of. They were like protein bars,
Mm-hmm.
but they were protein bars that had essentially like artificial sweeteners in them. And because I ate the whole box, my stomach did not, my digestive system did not handle the artificial sweeteners very well. So I got like basically, I was just full of internal gas. And it was
Mm.
so uncomfortable, like so uncomfortable that my husband took me to the emergency room. And I went to the emergency room, and of course they ask, like, what did you eat? And I tell them that, I ate a box of protein bars. And quite honestly, I'm sure that was not all that I had eaten, but um, I was also pretty sure it was the protein bars. And so the doctor basically says, you're not supposed to eat them all. I'm like, well, thank you, sir. Did they teach you that at medical school? Because I didn't know, right? Like it just,
Yeah.
oh my goodness. So yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I love when well, I don't love it, but when people say something to a person that this person already knows about themselves.
Yeah.
Um, trying to think of an example. I just had a brain fart. Um, like what you just said, you shouldn't be eating the whole box. Well, duh. I know
Right.
that, but I did it anyway. I wasn't me in
Right.
the moment.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's like in that moment, I think this is what happens for a lot of people is people think I should I know better, so I should do better. Like logically, I know I am not supposed to eat an entire box of protein bars. Like, I may not feel good if I eat them all. Like, yes, logically, I know that, but logic is not always the one that's running the show when
Mhm.
we're talking about eating, especially binging. There's so many different factors, but if we are, let's say, restriction is at play and our brain thinks scarcity's coming, famine's coming, we're going to go on some crazy diet again because you've done it however many multiple times over our lifetime. The brain then is like, this is nervous system. Survival part of our brain is like, no, 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 we will not do that. Eat. And so we're not going to starve again. So we're going to get as much food as we can now. If we know this stuff is going to be taken away from us, it's like that survival part of our brain totally will trump logic all day long. So what we want, and same with like emotions, if we're really afraid of a food, for example, when this is what I think happens a lot with people who like the people who say, well, I tried intuitive eating, but like that didn't work for me. I think what happens a lot is people are really afraid of a particular food, or they might even be afraid of themselves to be around certain food. And they bring that food in, or they, kind of do something that is going to kind of increase that fear
Mhm.
instead of this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with safety. It's like we have to bring in some safety because otherwise the fear part of our brain, the survival part of our brain is like, no, 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 this isn't okay. This isn't safe. And it's that part of the brain that will defy logic. That's like, I know like logically I'm not like quote unquote supposed to be eating this, or, I've had more than, the recommended serving size or whatever, like, or this doesn't even taste good. Like, how many of us
Yeah.
have done that? Like, this doesn't even taste good, but I can't stop eating, right? It's like the logical part of your brain is not even driving the bus at that
Yeah.
point. But what we can do is if we can set ourselves up, so many of us unknowingly, we don't do this on purpose, but we unknowingly set ourselves up to be in that like survival fear-based response over and over and over again. And then we think, oh, I'm the problem because I can't stop, or I can't, make the logical choice. It's like, no, your
Yeah.
logical brain, when your survival brain thinks there's a threat, that is the only thing that matters at all to your brain, is that part of the brain. So what we need to do is create safety with ourselves, safety with food, so then we can show ourselves, okay, this isn't as big and bad and scary as I have believed it to be for some people for decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned that too, because what I've seen is a lot of times with the intuitive eating, when you say, "Oh, it didn't work for me,"
Yes.
you got to a point. Well, I'm saying you, like in general, the people that
Mm-hmm.
I've
Mm-hmm.
worked with, is they get to a point where they're uncomfortable and they don't have that safety that you're talking about, and they make it mean this isn't the right path for me, when in
Yeah.
fact this is part of the path and you need to just keep going and push through that, because the
Yeah.
discomfort means that you are headed in the right direction.
Well, and I think I was talking to some clients the other day, and I was basically telling them like there's going to be discomfort either way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can all agree discomfort after a binge is terrible. And we could all, any one of us who really knows binging like intimately, we could write a manifesto about the discomfort and how awful it is, but it's like a familiar discomfort, right? It's like when we get into this other discomfort of this is different. Like, the brain wants to seek pleasure, avoid pain, use as little energy as possible. And that's why we don't like the using as little energy as possible is why we don't in general respond to change very well. So it's like there's going to be discomfort in changing something, even if logically we know why, we know all of these things. Like, there is going to be this level of discomfort for sure, and it's also our brain's job to like make sure everything's okay and like we're not being uncomfortable. So it's going to want to be like, no, 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 this isn't okay, this is bad, this is wrong, and then let's just go back to what we know, which is also really uncomfortable. But is I mean life is amazing and also awful and uncomfortable sometimes, right? It's both.
Yeah.
And so it's like really and this is where that emotional capacity comes in, increasing our capacity to kind of be with discomfort of various types, but then getting to know, can I discern, is this type of discomfort that is going to kind of like get me more where I want to go, or is this the type of discomfort that is going to keep me where I've been? And either one is okay. Like, it really, like, you literally, if you want to keep binging for the rest of your life, you can. Like, nobody, like, I think it's important that we don't take it away from anybody. And I think that happens also, right? It's like the binging is serving some sort of purpose. It's protecting in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Could be a number of different ways, but it is in some way. And when we come in and we're like, no, 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 that just has to go away, that also can feel threatening to the nervous system. So we need to figure out like what purpose is it serving? Let's find other ways to serve that purpose so that it feels okay and it feels safe. And I'm ready to just let it go instead of like fight it and think it's awful and it has to go away.
What would you say? And I know it's different for everybody because everybody's a different human, but what
Yeah.
would you say to somebody who's like just signing up to be your client and they're like, I've been binging for 30 years and I want to stop. What do I do?
Yeah. Yeah. I start really with like, let's imagine, like, let's envision this identity that you want for yourself, like the identity of an eater. Like we spend a lot of time with that. Like, what does that look like? What do you want for yourself? Because here's what we know about the brain. I love the brain. I love brain science. I don't go like super nerdy, but enough to know how powerful it is and how we can use it to work with us instead of kind of like working against ourselves. But here's what we know about the brain. The brain, if we give the brain something to look at, something to visualize, something to imagine, we can create from that image. If we don't give it something to imagine, something to create, something to visualize, we're going to just repeat what we've always done over and over because that's what the brain knows. This is why when you think about athletics, athletes, so many athletes, they visualize, right? Like visualization is so important. They visualize themselves in their event, in their competition. People, professional speakers do this also, right? Visualizing themselves on stage. The brain doesn't really know the difference between a visualization and the real thing. So when you start to imagine yourself in that future place, like at that your future identity as an eater, what does that look like? What does that feel like? What are these? And not from this place of I never have emotions again. I never have problems. I
Right.
never feel worried or anxious or overwhelmed because, hello, humanity. But like that's where I start is like we don't start with the food. I mean, we start with a little bit. And I agree with you in terms of permission. Like all foods are all foods are permissible and kind of talk about some general just kind of guidelines in terms of like making decisions. What does that look like? But
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's really like the foundation of where are we going? We've got to know where we're going because if we don't know where we're going, we're just going to keep getting what where we're just going to keep returning to where we've been. It's kind of like I use the analogy of a GPS, right? It's like if I know that I'm going to go to Florida, like I need to like what am I going to put in my GPS? I need to get there. Otherwise, if I just get in my car, I'm probably not ever going to get to Florida and I'm likely to just drive the same place that I'm just used to driving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to
Yeah.
take that analogy further, I like to tell my clients just start noticing without judging, like
Yes.
noticing your habits or noticing things about you. For example, one thing I noticed about myself was I was in a big Zoom meeting with like 42 people, I think. And it was a week long class, like 10, 12-hour days. I don't even remember. And every time I wanted a snack, I would put it on gallery view and see if anybody else was eating to
Mm,
make sure it was okay if I had a snack.
yes.
And I was like,
Yes.
but then I didn't want to judge it, so I just wrote it down. Looked to
Mm,
see if other people have snack, you
yes.
know.
Yes.
So
So powerful.
notice.
Yes, so powerful. I always talk about awareness. Awareness is always the very first step. We cannot change what we're not aware of. And I love what you said. It's like notice without judgment.
Mm-hmm,
Because I believe so. I believe there are 8 primary reasons why people binge, and each reason has its own corresponding solution. And reason number one, shame and judgment. We're in so much shame and judgment about ourselves and about our behavior that keeps us in the cycle. So to go back to the analogy we were talking about with the lights, right? If a binge or lights on the dashboard, shame and what we need to do, what we want to do to turn the lights off is get under the hood, figure out what's going on so we can address that so then we can get the lights to come off, right?
mm-hmm,
Well, shame and judgment are like a 50-pound weight that you are put on your hood. It's like we can't even get under the hood if we're in shame and judgment about what we've done. And it's similar, whether it's what we've done or what we just think about, what we notice. I actually similar I was in a Zoom meeting. This was last week. I was in a Zoom meeting. There were 3 other people, so there were 4 of us. But it was an early morning meeting. I had done workouts in the morning,
mm-hmm,
training for my triathlon, and I my plan was to have eaten breakfast before the meeting start? Well, I was running late. And so I get on the meeting, I have breakfast in front of me. And these were some people that were new to me. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, like, am I going to eat in front of them? Am I not? Like, what are they going to think if they like watch me, like eating this food? And fine, I just told them, I was like, just so you know, I didn't like ask permission, but I did let them know I will be eating. And of course, they were fine with it. But it was interesting to watch, like, here's this meeting. I'm, and kind of like, there's what will they be thinking? Or I'm eating and they're not. And is that weird? And like, what are they thinking if they're watching me eat? Like all, those types of things. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting to notice. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny you
Mhm.
mentioned that because today, I don't know how I did it, but I spread myself way too thin. You're my first
Mhm.
appointment and I'm going back to back to back until 3:30.
Oh
And
my
yesterday I was like, shit, when am I going to eat?
Yes.
And do I eat on
Yes.
screen?
Yes.
So, yeah.
I have done that. And especially when I started coaching, and I would, just get my clients basically can schedule on their own based on their own timing. And I remember this was some point last year. I remember looking at my calendar and I had back to back to back to back to back from like 9 to like 3:30 or 4. And I thought, oh. And so, I had these like little blocks where I just, essentially just kind of like snacked my way. I snacked my way through the day. And then I was like, okay, here's what I need to do. Make sure I plan in every day. I have at least 30 minutes to eat lunch. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
usually I do that. I have my calendar set up so that's 15 minutes in between. But I
Yeah.
think so many people responded to my post in the Need a Guest. I was like, this is
Yeah.
cool, but maybe I should open up Wednesdays and Mondays also. So I squeezed people in. And then last week I had to reschedule one of the podcast episodes because I wasn't feeling well. And so she's right after you.
Yes.
And then right after that is a client. And then I'm just like, I looked at my schedule yesterday and I went, oh, yeah, that wasn't
Yes.
very smart.
Yes. Yes. We've
It's
all been
okay. I'm
there.
brave. I can do it.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Yes. But I do think, it's like noticing without judgment. It really is the start of everything. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, like we need to know where we're going and we need to know where we are now. It's like where are we going and where are we now and how do we really like take good stock of where we are now without judging ourselves?
Yeah.
Because we need to become aware. We can't change what we're not, we can't change what we're not aware of. I heard this quote I love so much. And it's a guy by the name of Alex Howard. And he says, if you can see it, you don't have to be it. And I was like, ah, yes, I
Yeah.
love that so much because it's like it opens up. Sometimes, people think, I don't want to see it. I don't want to look at myself. I would rather just like keep my head in the sand
Mhm.
because I think I'm going to judge myself and then I'm going to beat myself up and then that's going to feel terrible. Right. But it's like, oh no, we have to see it first. But then if you can see it, you don't have to be it. So it's like, oh, now that gives me reason. Oh, okay, I do want to see it
Mhm.
because I want to unwind. I want to change this. I can't change it if I'm not willing to look at it. But it's not going to change if I look at it with shame and judgment. Like it will not change. Change does not happen from that place.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
even if you do notice and you do judge, then you can notice that you judged.
Yes. Yep.
The
Yes.
noticing. But yeah,
Yes.
like
All
you
the
were saying,
layers.
we can't change anything unless it's brought into our awareness. And even
Yes.
if something is brought into your awareness, doesn't mean you have to change it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like that permission. I love the concept of permission. Always permission. You have
Hmm.
permission to change your mind. You have permission to eat in front of other people. You have permission to eat whenever you want. You have permission to decide you don't want to change. You have
Hmm.
permission to decide you don't want to stop binging. You have permission to decide, you know what? I want to just keep dieting. Like I know when I diet, I do end up binging, but I just like it feels more comfortable to me. I would rather just kind of like feel like I'm actually pursuing something. You have permission to do that. Like
Yeah.
no, like just full permission for any of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Permission and it brings about, the idea that you have a choice. Now that it's in your awareness,
Yes.
you're a
Exactly.
choice. What are you going to do with
Yes.
it? If
Exactly.
anything.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So I
good.
have one more question for you.
Yeah.
And I ask everyone at the end of every episode, and that is, if you had one piece of advice that you could give to the world, what would that be?
Mm. I think for me, it is when you make decisions of any kind, make them from a place of does this feel nurturing, supportive, and sustainable? I love these three words for decisions of any kind, right? If it's around food, if it's around what sort of like movement activity I want to do, if it's about a project I want to do, if it is anything, my relationship with friends or with my husband, like nurturing, supportive, and sustainable. It's like, oh, when I hear those words, I just feel like just kind of like a calmness. Like I just like my nervous system like really settles into that. And so those words may not be exactly for you. So you may think about your own words. I love when people like come up with their own words. Like what are the words that are going to guide you? So for me, it's like decisions, nurturing, supportive, and sustainable. Like, so I guess my advice would be try those words on. If those words don't really fit for you, find your own words. Like, what are the words that are going to guide my decisions? I think so many of us make decisions that are like, I can do it for now. Like, I'm just going to like push through. And then, we're exhausted or we're sick or, whatever else. There's like a cost involved,
Yeah.
or we're doing it like at a cost. Like, and so, but when it's nurturing, it's supportive and sustainable, like there's not a cost there. We're really just like the benefit. And then that can kind of like, we can use the momentum and the compound effect of what's nurturing, supportive, and sustainable and keep doing that consistently. It's like, yes. Like what a amazing way to kind of live and approach life instead of the like hustle, grind, all of this stuff that leads to burnout or rebellion or all of, these other things.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, Jane Pilger signing off. Until next time.